Do you like light novels? Well, you're going to have to check out these particular titles.
That Man and His Manga.
Hello and welcome to That Man, and today we're looking at another light novel related thing. A few months ago I did a video on my personal top 10 favourite light novels, and I was thinking there's a lot of light novels that I absolutely adore, but for whatever reason I couldn't put them in the top 10. Maybe they hit a more niche market and they're not for everybody, or maybe they just were good but not good enough to be in the top 10. Today I'm going to right that wrong, and we're going to look at my top 10 favourite underrated titles. The first title I want to talk about is one that was really recommended to me as, if you like Konosuba, you'll love this one. And it's one that I really wanted to get back into reading. And that title is Defeating the Demon Lord is a Cinch if you've got a ringer. This is an interesting one because it tells a story of, once again, a pretty useless squad. However, there's a little bit of a difference. It's not been long since the Demon Lord has declared war on mankind, and so, as in traditional Isekai, someone has been reincarnated or summoned to this particular world in order to save the day. A hero that is obsessed with women. Sounds normal. Well, there's a few little differences here. We've got a swordswoman who's just recently defected from her father's school of swordsmaster. We've got a mage who can only use fire. And to top it off, we've got a priest. A priest who has been assigned to the team by the church. And he's got power to spare. And this is what made the series so interesting for me. This really is a story about the priest himself. He is ridiculously overpowered. He is almost immediately kicked out by the rest of the party because he's a man. He immediately thinks, well, it's because the hero wants all of the girls to himself. There's some interesting things in here, and what I liked about this is the story of an overpowered person who is really having to downplay the fact that they are overpowered. They've essentially been kicked out of the team, however they absolutely require to ensure that the defeating the Demon Lord goes ahead. They can't fail in this, and so they're working from the shadows, working behind the scenes in order to make sure everything goes ahead swiftly. Now, I've got volumes 1 to 3 of this, and I only read volume 1. I really enjoyed it. However, it is quite long-winded. I believe it only ended up with 4 volumes, but because it never had an anime, nobody checked this one out, and I really feel that it deserves its time. Now, I personally can't see, does it end? Or was it cancelled? I know there's certain other series which didn't make it on this list because it was kind of stopped halfway, and that was the vending machine one. But I think you're going to get a lot of really good content out of this for the meantime. So I recommend at least checking it out. The next title is one that I had so many high hopes for when it came to the anime. However, the anime was really, really disappointing. To the point that when I brought this series up a few months later, everyone said that it was a terrible series. But people who like light novels seem to give it a bit of a defence. Unfortunately, this is one where the anime has really tarred it. And that title is Infinite Dendrogram. Now, Infinite Dendrogram, it has so much going for it that I was genuinely baffled that the anime managed to screw it up so badly. It tells the story of, well, an MMO, a VR MMO, you know, them things. Sword Art Online is not on this list. However, this VR MMO, it's pretty interesting. It accurately depicts the life. You really feel that you are in this world. And a young man is about to start his game. Now, unlike a lot of these VR MMOs, he doesn't end up trapped in this other world. In fact, it's genuinely one of these ones where he gets so into this game, and let's face it, if you are in a world, another world that feels, looks, tastes, no, real, you're probably going to start getting that impression that this is a real thing. The characters, the NPCs, they feel real, and if they die, they're dead. And this has caused a bit of a war between all of the different countries, much like, for example, Warcraft. That's the easiest one I can say because I don't play many games, many MMO games. So in Warcraft you've got the Alliance and the Horde. So if the Horde, for example, killed one of the Alliance members, normally they would just respawn. In this game, they're dead for good. But that's the NPCs. The people themselves, they get a little bit of a debuff, or they lose some time. They can't come back to life straight away. And this has given the world a little bit more of a brain, an identity than it has otherwise. Now, there's a lot of really good things in this particular series. I would really recommend it, especially if you like shonen battle manga. There are a lot of really great fights in here that I don't really see done elsewhere. The world building is really well done, and it's going to appeal to you guys who like Xenoblade Chronicles 2, because you get waifu swords. And I believe Genshin Impact's also doing that. And honestly, I was reading this and I was so impressed. I was really surprised at how good this series was, especially after seeing the anime and just being like, oh, this wasn't very good. I'd rather be reading anything else right now. It does take a little bit of a while to get into, and the protagonist is a little bit generic, which this is one of the reasons why I kind of didn't put at the top. But I feel like it's one of those ones, I mean, I believe I'm on to volume 4, and I just feel more and more rewarded every time that I read it. Definitely go check it out if you have a chance. It's on J Novel Club, so if you got a subscription, you're laughing. The next series I want to talk about is Monster Girl Doctor. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. It is an ecchi and does have monster girls and monster girl titties. However, Monster Girl Doctor actually has managed to pull off an incredible world. It's a fantasy world with, of course, monster girls. And while it does get bogged down in the ecchi from time to time, a lot of it is very clinical. It's quite interesting. I was really surprised at how good this particular series was. It's about a young man, a doctor, and he's just opened up his own infirmary with his childhood friend, Alamia, who acts as the pharmacist. And he goes his day-to-day life basically prioritising, focusing on the monster girls of Lindworm. Now, there is a huge amount of backstory and there's a huge amount of lore attached to this that all manages to fit into the narrative of Monster Girls. Everything feels like it makes sense, and you can tell that this creator has managed to really get into this. They've really done their homework and ensured that everything that has been discussed fits. Now, a lot of people who like Monster Musume enjoy it for the harem antics, and of course you're going to get that in here. Dr. Glenn, he's well liked by the monster girls of the populace, be it his assistant Safi or the others, including centaurs, harpies, mermaids, cyclops, spiders, or even the dragon who runs it all. But it never feels too bogged down in that. It does have its moments, and I'm not going to lie, you're going to first read it, and when he's trying to, you know, look after a cow girl, it's kind of like, yeah, this is going to get too ecchi. But while there's ecchi moments, it really feels like it's once or maybe twice in the entire volume. Yeah, sure, if you don't like that kind of thing, you're not going to have a really great time. It might be a little bit too much for you. But if you don't mind that, I would really recommend this because it is a really good title. I really like it, and despite it being a harem, it kind of plays itself close to its chest. You really get the impression that he's going to end up with his childhood friend rather than the other girls, and I commend it for that. I really like that aspect when it comes to these harem series, because otherwise, I don't know, I know the whole best girl kind of thing, but for me it doesn't always work. But Monster Girl Doctor is one of those series that really does work, and I recommend checking it out if you want an ecchi title. The next title I want to bring attention to is How a Realist Hero Rebuilt the Kingdom. This is an interesting one because while the hero is isekai'd into another world, normally they're said to, be stupidly overpowered or, just fight the demon lord. This one is a little bit different. The hero in this, he's been talking with the king, and the country is struggling. They're kind of backed up. They're losing money left, right and centre. But he has a few ideas taken from back in Japan that could potentially move the kingdom back into the green. This is a story about a realist hero, a hero who, he's a little bit smart for his age, a little bit smart beyond his age maybe, but he is going to rebuild the kingdom, and he decides that anybody who has a gift he's going to put to use. And that is the beauty of this series. It's a world building series, literally world building. Think of it maybe as that time I got reincarnated as slime without the overpowered character, combined with Dr. Stone with all of the technological advances. It still remains firmly grasped in the world of fantasy, which is absolutely fine. However, it just feels that little bit smarter. I just felt that when I was reading it, I felt that everything made sense. Now, I've only read volume 1 and 2, however, I absolutely loved this. I'm really excited to read more. I know that there's quite a lot of volumes out. I think there's about 10 or 12 volumes out already in English. And I feel like it's one of those titles that I feel is really popular, at least it's well regarded over here, whereas over in Japan it wasn't popular enough to get an anime until recently. But I'm interested to see how this one goes. There's a lot of really good stuff here, and if you want a world building that's about rebuilding the kingdom, you're gonna have a great time with this one. The next title is, well, it's probably the most controversial title I've ever read, and it's one that I personally love. It's not quite Kino's Journey. Nope. It's not quite Kino's Journey. It's not that good. But Wandering Witch, The Journey of Elena, just makes me smile whenever I read it. It's one of those titles that you can just get into and read a chapter on your break, or you can get in and out of it. This is The Journey of Elena. It's about a young wandering witch where she goes from country to country, observing, sometimes, very sometimes, getting involved. Now, if you've seen the anime, be careful. This is another one where, from what I understand, the anime does manage to change things up a little bit. They manage to add things on which don't necessarily improve the story. So I feel like if you do like the series and you are interested in the series, might be worth checking out the light novel on top of the anime itself. So, like I said, this is about a young witch who goes from country to country, as the country of lies, the country of beautiful people, the country for mages. There's always something happening in these countries, something a little bit dark, and the question is, should Elena get involved? Now, we've seen other titles such as Kino's Journey or even Doctor Who, which has a very similar premise. Go from country to country or planet to planet and meddle. Elena only meddles when it suits her. In fact, she's quite greedy. In fact, she's an incredibly flawed character. But that's what makes it so intriguing for me. She, as one person, is judging everybody else. But should she be judging? Is it her place to judge? Doctor Who very much has black and white, evil aliens gonna kill everything. But is it right for one girl, a visitor, to judge everybody else? Even though you as the reader are probably doing the exact same thing. It's an interesting one, and like I said, it's one of those ones where I feel it's a stopgap until Kino's Journey actually gets released over here. But it's one that I was pleasantly surprised with. I like the intrigue of the different countries. I like the slightly morally grey areas of everything that was going on. I like this series. I really do, and I'm going to stand by it. It's not perfect by any means, but a lot of series really aren't. If you like the anime, or if you want to have a little bit of a different read, maybe try checking this one out. You might change your mind on it. The next title is an interesting one. It's one that I held off reading for quite some time, but once I did, I couldn't get enough of it. Now, at the moment, there are only 3 volumes. Hopefully, we'll get to see some more. But that title is Her Majestys Swarm. This is about a young person who... they are really good at strategy games. Think Warcraft or Starcraft. I believe when I did review this, people did comment saying that it is more similar to a certain race on Starcraft. She's very good at Starcraft, or not Starcraft, to the point that she can win impressively well with the Arachnids, a spider-like race. She is then transported, reborn into this world, and in order to survive, she starts using her tactics from the game, because everything's so similar. In fact, everything is incredibly similar. So she's going to use everything in her powers to make sure that everything is right. It's one of these ones where it starts off as kind of trying to do the best thing, trying to do the right thing. However, quickly becomes so much more. The corruption or even darkness in her heart manages to overpower things, and she does some pretty terrible things in order to ensure her swarm come out on top. Meatballs. That's all I'm going to say. Meatballs. It's an interesting title. It's one that I thought was nice and dark. It was the nice amount of darkness. Apart from darkness from Konosuba. But it's one that I just felt that I just really enjoyed. I couldn't get enough of. So I'm really recommended because nobody was talking about it, and I felt that when people picked it up, it was like, oh, I want to try this one out. I want to try it out. So yeah, go check this one out. It's probably worth your time if you want a different type of Isekai. Everything on here is going to be an Isekai I fancy. Next up is a title that I spoke about a few times. In fact, it's been a long time since my last actual review on it. And it's a title that I felt had a pretty successful anime last year. And that title is Do You Love Your Mom and Her 2-Hit Multi-Target Attacks? Now, wait. I know just from that title, people are going to be just like, this is just stupid. This is just ridiculous. I could be reading my teen comedy romance snafu. Careful. Now, this is no means perfect, and if you like ecchi series, you're going to get a lot more out of this than you would otherwise. But this is not a bad isekai. In fact, this does a lot of really good things. Again, much like Infinite Dendrogram and Monster Girl Doctor, this one really stuck to the world building. This is about a young boy who is slightly estranged from her mother. She's quite smothering. She's constantly just like, oh yes, I adore you, I love you so much. He he inadvertently agrees to end up in a trial run for a particular game. A game that is designed to bond children with their parents a little bit more. So, he agrees to this game eventually, and he becomes the hero. He manages to get, a sort of a harem. However, the snag is, his mom came with him. And while he is overpowered, she's even more overpowered, to the point that she pretty much finishes every single battle before he can even get involved. Sounds by the books. However, they really stuck to this whole mom-based game. Nearly all of the other characters, all of the other NPCs are moms. All of the power-ups are more suited for moms. For example, a mom's love, a mom's flashlight, or whatever stupid thing they want to come out with. There is some things, I mean, it's very kind of trashy. It's like one of those things. It's like, oh well, this one's the casino arc, this one's the schoolgirl arc, this one's this arc, and it's kind of like, oh well, you can see on here that there's so much things on here that are kind of made to sell merchandise, but what you do genuinely get is a well thought out title that you're gonna have some laughs with. Sure, the ecchi might be a little bit too much for some people, but if you want a decent world built title, you're gonna have a decent time with this one, surprisingly. The next title is yet another fantasy. However, this one focuses on something a little bit different. Food. Now, we have had a few really good food series. Food Wars, Golden Kamui, Restaurant to Another World, that's a good one, which only just didn't make it on this list. I do want to cover that one in the near future. But one that I picked up a few months ago and absolutely fell in love with was, well, of course, one that everybody hyped up. Cooking with Wild Game. Cooking with Wild Game is interesting because it focuses more similar to Golden Kamui. A young man, he rushes back into his father's restaurant to save the precious knife, you know, the family heirloom. It seems like he lost his life in the process, because some mafia guys apparently set it on fire. He wakes up in another world, and standing over him is the beautiful Ifa. She's a bit of a tribal woman. In fact, he's woken up into a very primitive world. A world in which not everything is as easy as it seems. Think Golden Kamui meets Dr. Stone. Kind of prehistoric. There's these powerful creatures that are all over the place, and Ifa hunts them down. Yes, she's a badass tribal huntswoman, and honestly one of the best waifu material in the light novel genre. She treats him to some of her food. She kind of puts it on herself to look after him when he's kind of just wandering around, and he eats the food and it is horrible. Even after eating so much food, he doesn't feel full because the food is that bad. Fortunately, he is a trained chef, and so he begins cooking with these wild game, with these monsters that Ifa is killing. It is going to be a romance, and honestly I'm so excited to read more and more of this one because it was really good. The characters were really well defined, and I really liked the kind of change in the atmosphere. A lot of series, as evidenced by this list, are isekai or into a traditional fantasy world. This one is a fantasy world, but you could kind of see this being like a tribal village somewhere. It's really interesting how it's done. And I'm really looking forward to exploring this world and seeing a little bit more of it. Cooking with Wild Game is the one that I kind of surprised that doesn't have an anime announcement quite yet. It just surprises me that they're not getting in on this. But everything I've read so far, I'm really enjoying of it. Check it out. The next title is one that the author doesn't need any introduction. They created one of the biggest light novel isekais of all time. A title that is hugely hyped and I feel echoes out of the whole of the light novel genre. They created Konosuba. Before Konosuba, however, and apparently afterwards, because it sounds like he went back to creating this, was Combatants Will Be Dispatched. This is an interesting one because you can see a lot of the content that eventually became Konosuba in here. However, a lot of the things managed to stand out. This tells a story of an evil corporation, supervillains who have taken over the Earth, or they're fighting the fight against Earth. In order to get more resources, they've started to expand onto other planets and other worlds. That's right. Agent 6 is tasked with taking over an entire planet. A planet where it should be pretty easy for him. One snag, however. Everyone there is an idiot. Doesn't help that there's a demon lord already on that planet, and it's a lot more advanced than things are being let on. This is an isekai in which it's not reborn, it's just a person going to another world, an evil villain who goes to another world and does jerk off things. And this is where the series kind of works. Whereas Konosuba, I feel Kazuma was trash. He was a trash person. Agent 6 is a trash person but has a reason to be trash. He's an evil villain. He gets evil points by doing horrible things. And those evil points can be cashed in order to get goodies that will help him, such as rocket launchers or helicopters or the destroyer from Konosuba. Of course, it wouldn't be a title like Konosuba without plenty of useless girls, and this series has a ton of them. We have Snow, who, well, she's kind of the mix between Aqua and Darkness. She's powerful, but she's very greedy. We have Grim, who is a dark occultic girl who curses people and has accidentally cursed herself so she can't walk, but she can. We have other characters. We have a Chimera who, anything that they eat, they get a bit of abilities, such as similar to Kirby. We have the scientific advisor who's super powerful, but she's not really that useful anyway. She's just really handy to have. And we have Alice, a mechanoid who is starting to break her programming. In fact, she answers back rather than helps out. And that's the joy of this. If you want another series like Konosuba, you're going to have a really good time with Combatants Will Be Dispatched. It's genuinely a good title. Before we go on to the last title, I want you guys to let me know, what do you think is an underrated light novel title? Is there a title out there that you feel just doesn't get the recognition it deserves? Let me know in the comments, and you know, I might even check it out, because I'm always on the scope for new light novels. Even though I've got a huge backlog, and I'm like on volume 1 and 2 of a 12-part series. But still recommend them, and if you haven't already, remember to subscribe to the channel. There's tons more light novel stuff, including my personal best top 10 light novels, at least for this year. So if you haven't already, go check that out after number 1. The last title I want to talk about is one that I'm quite surprised doesn't get more love. Everyone I know who has read it seems to love it, but maybe because it doesn't have the anime, it doesn't get the attention it deserves. If I was going to compare it to a manga, maybe Berserk? Maybe this is the Berserk of the light novels? And that title is Torture Princess, Framed Torture-chen. I hope I pronounced that right. This is interesting because this was one that I really wanted to cover for quite some time on the channel, but then I knew YouTube, being YouTube, will just be like, you're not covering that, we're going to stop that. So maybe I will in the near future once I read a few more volumes. I read volume 1 earlier on this year and I was absolutely amazed. This tells the story of a young man who, let's face it, hasn't had a good life. In fact, he's been the victim of a lot of abuse and, well, torture. When he's reborn, he's picked to be the butler for the torture princess. A princess who, well, she's been targeted and she's been tasked by the church in order to kill multiple demons. And only then, once she's killed everything, may she burn at the torture's hand by the church. That's right, it's a grim title. It's tackling a lot of subject matter that, let's face it, isn't going to appeal to everybody. But I'm genuinely surprised because I see a lot of other series where they don't really go as dark as this, but seem to have a tribute to being dark. Like I said, I liken this to Berserk. I just know the whole demon killing. It's not like, oh, my sister's been turned into a demon, so I'm going to have to kill people with the power of waves. No, this is very much the whole torture princess aspect of things. It's one that's difficult to explain without spoiling too many things. It's just so interesting how these characters manage to bond, and how even though he's stuck in a world where everything's going to kill him and basically his master is a horrible person, it's still better than his previous life. And it goes to prove that even though you might basically be in hell, sometimes real world is a lot worse. I would really recommend people who want something different to check this one out. And if you like manga and you like Berserk, or if you like Vinland Saga and stuff like that, I think this is one that you're going to get a lot of really good content from. I look forward to reading more of it because I've just picked up volume 2 and volume 3 and I'm excited to dig into it.